Hello, I'm Molly, and on Christmas morning, I found $428,000 missing from my company account. My sister stole it. She looked me dead in the eye and said, "Prove it, Miss CEO." My mother, she didn't even ask what happened. She just whispered, "Don't ruin Christmas." The same Christmas where my sister gifted our mom diamond earrings, paid for with the money she stole from me. And when I tried to speak up, everyone told me to calm down. But what if I told you that wasn't the first time they'd erased me? That it wasn't just the money. They'd been rewriting my place in this family for years. And what if, this time, I had the proof? Would they finally see me? Or would they bury me all over again? I opened my eyes before the alarm. Not that I needed one. I hadn't slept more than a couple of hours. Old habits from years of running my cybersecurity company had hardwired me to wake early, especially on days following big transactions. This was supposed to be a victory lap. That $428,000 deposit from the new healthcare client marked a turning point for my business. Still lying under the covers, I reached for my phone on the nightstand, thumbed in my login credentials, and tapped into the account. 0. My brain froze. My pulse didn't. I blinked, refreshed the page. Still 0. I sat up, fast, phone nearly slipping from my hand. The log showed the transaction. 3:18 a.m. A complete wire transfer to an unknown routing number. No memos. No flag. Just gone. I stared at the time. 6:17 a.m. 3 hours ago, while I was asleep under my mother's roof, in the same home I grew up in, someone had drained the operating account of my company, my employees' salaries, my vendor payments, my reputation, my credibility. I bolted upright, my breath shallow. I knew the steps. I'd written the manuals on breach response. My fingers flew over the screen, multi-factor authentication logs, IP pings, email confirmations. Every security measure had been used. On from my device. Only one person besides me had ever held that laptop without asking. Isolde. It was a flicker of a thought at first, one I tried to squash before it rooted. But I couldn't deny the pattern, the way she'd hovered near my work bag yesterday when I stepped away to help Mom baste the ham. How she lingered in the den after dinner, pretending to scroll her phone, her eyes a little too interested in what wasn't hers. I exhaled slowly, clenched my jaw, and set the phone down. I needed to confirm, quietly. No accusations, not yet. Downstairs, the smell of cinnamon rolls and coffee drifted through the air like a bribe for peace. Maribel, our mother, had already set the table, complete with monogrammed napkins and poinsettias. Isolde stood near the fireplace, her back to me, laughing at something on her phone, hair swept into that perfect loose bun she always used for family events, careless but curated. I joined breakfast like a ghost in my own story. My smile was automated, my words minimal. Isolde played her role with ease, doting daughter, charming sister, slightly hungover but endearing. I watched her closely. She was glowing, radiant even, and not in the way of someone who'd just received good news, but someone who'd gotten away with something. After breakfast, after the dishes were cleared and the wrapping paper neatly stacked for recycling, I waited for the room to calm. The chatter dipped. Mom stepped away to refill the teapot. I stood. "Isolde," I said, my voice even, "can we talk?" She raised an eyebrow, casually, as if I'd asked to borrow lip balm. "Sure. Here?" "Here's fine," I replied. She crossed her arms. "What's up, little sis?" I kept my voice low. "The company account is empty. $428,000, gone, at 3:18 this morning." The room hushed. Maribel paused mid-pour. Isolde didn't blink. Instead, she tilted her head, smirked, and said, "That's a bold claim. You might want to double-check your math." "I've double-checked everything," I said. "The transfer happened using my credentials, from my laptop." That's when she smiled. That smirk I knew from childhood, the same one she wore when she spilled paint on my science project and claimed I'd overreacted. The same smirk when she failed her college exams but convinced Mom it was due to stress, not skipping class. She took one step forward, her voice silk and venom. "Prove it, Miss CEO." Mom set the kettle down, eyes darting between us. "Girls, not now. It's Christmas. Can we not do this today?" I turned to her, stunned. Mom, please, she whispered, a hand on her chest. Don't ruin Christmas. I wasn't sure what stung more, Isolde's words or Maribel's plea. The room had frozen. No one said a word. No one stood up for me. No one asked Isolde what she was doing at 3:18 in the morning. I sat back down, slow. The room thawed. Conversation picked back up, slightly forced. Someone asked about the roast. Someone else commented on the weather. But the undercurrent was electric. I could feel it in my teeth. From my seat, I watched Isolde glide through the room, a glass of champagne in hand, her voice rising now and then in laughter. She made a show of presenting our mother with a tiny velvet Tiffany box. Maribel gasped, teared up. Oh, Isolde, these are gorgeous! Diamond studs. Elegant. Classic. As Maribel leaned in to kiss her cheek, I noticed the receipt peeking from the discarded wrapping, just for a moment. My stomach clenched. I recognized those digits, the last 4 numbers of my corporate card. I didn't go back downstairs until nearly noon. I'd spent over an hour pacing in the small guest room, the thin carpet bearing the pressure of my steps as I tried to slow the racing in my chest. I kept staring at the last 4 digits printed on the receipt that had fallen out of the Tiffany box. Those numbers weren't just familiar. They were mine. My corporate card. When I finally walked back into the living room, Isolde was curled on the couch, mug of cider in hand, laughter spilling from her lips like honey as she recounted some story to our uncle. She glanced up, gave me a tight smile, the kind you'd use on a customer you can't stand but need to please. I didn't return it. Maribel was setting up the last round of presents, family tradition. She always saved the real gifts for midday. Something about building anticipation, she'd say, as if life itself hadn't already taught us enough about waiting for what may never come. Isolde stood up and handed Mom a square box wrapped in shimmering gold paper. For you, Mom, she said sweetly. I wanted you to have something extra special this year. Maribel beamed, cradling the box like it was fragile glass. Oh, sweetie, you already gave me so much this morning with that brunch spread. She peeled back the paper, her fingers moving slow, savoring the moment. The room gathered around, waiting. I stood back. Inside the box was a delicate blue jewelry case. When she flipped it open, the collective gasp was instant. Diamond earrings. Classy, understated, and unquestionably expensive. Oh my goodness, Isolde, Maribel whispered, teary-eyed. They're perfect. I watched her pull the earrings from the box and hold them up to her earlobes. Isolde stepped in, helped her clasp one in place. They're real? One cousin asked. Isolde laughed gently. Of course. I mean, what else would they be? Everyone clapped. Someone whistled. Maribel looked ready to cry. They must have cost a fortune, she said, looking at her oldest daughter like she'd grown angel wings. Nothing's too much for you, Mom. Isolde kissed her cheek. You've always been the one holding everything together. A line so rehearsed, so perfectly delivered, I nearly gagged. I stood frozen as the applause fizzled into praise and chatter. And as Maribel leaned in to hug Isolde, that little white receipt, glossy and folded, slipped from the jewelry box and floated to the floor near the fireplace. I stepped forward before anyone else noticed, picked it up. I didn't say a word. I just read the bottom line. Visa ending in 93A7. My corporate card. I could barely hear over the blood rushing in my ears. Everything okay, hun? Maribel asked, noticing my stiff shoulders. I folded the receipt in half, slipped it into my sweater pocket. Just feeling a little warm, I said. Going to grab some air. Outside, I stood on the back porch, gripping the railing until my knuckles ached. The December air bit at my cheeks, but it grounded me. She used my money. She took from my company, my team, to buy earrings for the same woman who always reminded me not to outshine my sister. And now she was soaking in praise she didn't earn, bought with funds she stole. When I came back inside, Maribel pulled me aside in the hallway. Hey, she said gently. I know this holiday's a little tense, but let's just try to enjoy the time we have, okay? I looked at her, genuinely baffled. Did you not hear what I said this morning? She exhaled. I did. But it's Christmas, Molly. You've always been the more intense one. Maybe this is a misunderstanding. A misunderstanding? She leaned closer. You can be a little reactive. Maybe wait until after the holidays to look into it fully. Isolde passed by behind her, catching my eye with a look that said it all. Smug, untouched, certain. I walked away before I said something I couldn't take back. Later, as gifts were opened, laughter flowed easily. The room radiated warmth. Twinkling lights, cinnamon-scented candles, matching pajamas. It looked like a Norman Rockwell painting. Except for one detail. Me. I was seated at the far end of the table, near the kitchen door, as if I'd been placed there deliberately. Isolde was in her element, center stage, laughing, pouring wine, complimenting everyone's outfits. I was close enough to hear everything, but far enough to feel invisible. And then, without trying, I remembered another Christmas, 10 years ago. I had landed my first private client, spent weeks building a custom firewall for a dental practice on the east side. I gifted Mom a framed photo of her childhood home, restored from a damaged negative. Isolde showed up late with half-eaten chocolate and a used bottle of Chanel. Maribel had smiled, hugged her tight, and said, "You always know how to make the room brighter." She'd turned to me later and said, "Try not to rub your achievements in your sister's face. It's not classy." I should have learned my place then. Back in the present, I sipped my eggnog and watched the laughter swirl around the room like I wasn't even there. I wasn't angry anymore. Not in the way they expected. I was watching, noticing, counting. I studied the way Isolde's hand landed just so on Mom's shoulder, the way she deflected any questions about work or money with vague charm and watery eyes, and I remembered something else. Predators don't just steal, they make sure no one believes the person they take from. I looked down the table, watched her bask in that spotlight. I was always the seat filler, I thought, never the centerpiece. I didn't need much light. The glow from my laptop screen lit the entire guest room in a soft, pale blue. Outside the window, the last of the Christmas lights blinked against the night. Downstairs, I could still hear faint echoes of laughter, the clinking of glasses, the rumble of my cousin's deep voice telling yet another story about someone none of us really liked, but always pretended to. They were toasting marshmallows in the fireplace, warming themselves in a cocoon of cheer and shared illusions. Meanwhile, I was huddled on a faded quilt in the corner bedroom of the house I used to call home, scrolling through audit trails and security logs like my life depended on it. Because honestly, it did. I logged into the admin console for my company's internal server. Navigating through our secure audit panel had always felt familiar, like muscle memory. But something was wrong. Right there, in the log records, there was a clear, gaping hole. A full hour and 20 minutes of vanished activity. The record stopped at 2:41 a.m., then jumped to 4:02 with no sign of access in between. And worse, when I tried to pull recovery notifications, I found nothing. Not one security alert, no download logs, no access notifications. All gone. Clean. Surgical. Whoever did this wasn't just playing games. They knew what they were doing. And they'd used my tools against me. I backed out of the panel, fingers slightly trembling, not from fear, but from clarity, the kind that sharpens right before a storm hits. My door was cracked open just enough for sound to sneak through. I heard my name. Not loudly, just a soft, sugar-coated mention. Isolde's voice, delicate, calculated. "I just think she's going through something," she told someone, maybe our aunt. "I mean, Molly's always been intense. Work-obsessed. Everything's a crisis." A little laughter followed. Then, Maribel chimed in. "She never learned how to relax. She carries the whole world on her back like she's the only one who can fix it." I closed the laptop slowly. Their narrative was writing itself without me. They didn't need facts. They had each other. I needed a break, even if it was short. I stood, stretched, and quietly made my way to the kitchen for water. The hallway lights had been dimmed, casting long shadows along the gallery wall where family photos lived, Most of them hadn't changed since I was a teenager. Vacations, birthdays, the same forced smiles. But one frame was new, a fresh 8 by 10, nestled in a bronze frame above the mantel. A holiday photo from last Christmas. Everyone was in it. Isolde, Mom, my cousins, their partners, even the cat. Everyone, except me. I stared at it. At first, I assumed I must have missed that particular gathering, but I hadn't. I'd been the one who hired the photographer, booked the slot, and paid the invoice. I even remembered arranging the seating chart for that day because Mom didn't want the kids looking out of order. I stepped closer. The photo looked familiar, but edited, cropped. I knew the original had a wider angle, taken from the staircase landing. I should have been seated on the left side, next to Uncle Joe. Now, it was just blank air where I used to be. "You were always hard to photograph," came a voice behind me. I turned. Maribel. She gave a small, tight smile. "We cropped the photo a little to make it more balanced for the frame. No big deal." "No big deal. Right?" "I paid for that session," I said quietly. She shrugged. "Well, you always said it wasn't about the credit." I didn't respond. Not because I couldn't, but because I realized it wouldn't matter. Back in the guest room, I sat on the edge of the bed and stared at the blank login field on my laptop. I didn't type. I just let the silence swell inside me. How did we get here? One moment, you're the kid who fixes the broken router so your mom can watch her favorite baking show. The next, you're being edited out of your own family history because you made the mistake of being reliable, of showing up, of succeeding without apology. I asked myself things I didn't want to ask. Had I maybe forgotten to log out? Was it possible I'd made some mistake that allowed this to happen? What if I left the system open after logging client invoices? What if my authentication codes were stored somewhere they shouldn't have been? Doubt snuck in like a draft through an old window. Quiet but insistent. That's what makes this kind of betrayal so vicious. It rewrites your own memory, makes you question if maybe you're the one who's lost the plot. I stood again, this time rummaging through the side drawer. I pulled out a worn USB, a burner I kept as part of my offline recovery protocol. Most of my team thought I was paranoid. Maybe I was. But that paranoia was about to pay off. I plugged it in, launched my file recovery shell, and began a deep scan for ghost files, clones, temp backups, even time-stamped cache fragments. The fan on the laptop whirred into a low hum. Outside my door, Isolde laughed again, that fake, breathy kind of laugh she used when she wanted to seem charming and harmless. It used to fool everyone. It still did. I whispered to myself as the progress bar ticked upward. If I'm invisible in this house, I'll make damn sure I'm undeniable somewhere else. Because this wasn't just about the money anymore. It was about what they'd done when they thought I wasn't watching. What they said when they believed I'd stay silent. And I'd had enough of being edited out. I didn't hesitate. I closed the audit logs, minimized the recovery program still scanning in the background, and opened the local archive buried inside a system folder I hadn't touched in weeks. It wasn't labeled anything special, just a string of numbers and a generic name, a tactic I'd used more times than I could count, hidden in plain sight. There it was, a full render of the year-end tribute video, the very one I'd spent 3 nights editing, splicing together client testimonials, footage of our team celebrating wins, and a closing message from me recorded in my office at 2 a.m., voice hoarse but hopeful. It was meant to be part of the family slideshow during Christmas dinner. A moment of pride, something I had hoped might bridge the gap between what I did and who I was to them. But when it didn't appear on the screen last night, I'd assumed someone had forgotten. Maybe Mom had changed the order, or the file was too large to load. Now I knew better. I played the video on mute first, scanning each transition, checking timestamps. It was complete, the version I'd exported 3 days ago, which meant someone deliberately removed it before the presentation, and I only sent that file to one person, Isolde. She'd offered to help Mom with the tech stuff, said it so casually while sipping wine and scrolling through her phone. That offer, now in hindsight, felt as orchestrated as the earrings she'd gifted hours before. I took a breath, unmuted the video. It opened with our logo. A shot of my lead engineer high-fiving our intern after they cracked a security patch for a regional bank. My voice narrated the journey of Ironlock Systems, from a futon and 2 burner laptops to the client roster we had now. The testimonials rolled in, clients praising our integrity, our discretion, our grit. Then came my closing segment. I was sitting at my desk, the camera close, my face drawn from exhaustion, but smiling anyway. "We didn't build Ironlock to win awards," I said in the clip. "We built it so that businesses could feel like someone had their back, someone who didn't just know the threats, but knew how to fight them." The screen faded to black, then ended on the company's tagline, "Trust isn't given, it's proven." I sat there, frozen. They'd erased that, erased me. Not just my work, not just the story, but my presence in the room where it mattered. Again. I exhaled and shut the laptop. No more pretending. Still shaken, I decided to pull an old document box from the closet. I needed to collect receipts, old password logs, anything I might need to track the money trail. Isolde hadn't just taken money, she'd taken proof, and I intended to build it back, line by line. The box was heavier than I remembered. Inside were company expense reports, early tax filings, even napkins from the coffee shop I used to live in while pitching my first clients. And then I found it. Folded into the edge of a manila folder was an envelope, weathered, yellowing at the corners. My name wasn't on it, but the handwriting was unmistakable. Isolde's. Curiosity overtook hesitation. I opened it. There was no date, but the tone hit like a gut punch. "You always say Molly's the smart one, the successful one," the letter began. "Well, let her have her trophies. Just don't expect her to ever love us back. She was born distant." I read it again, slower this time. She was born distant. The rest of the letter rambled through complaints, how Mom gave me too much freedom, how I never included Isolde in my work, how I was cold, unfeeling, unreachable. The envelope had no stamp. The address was scribbled out. It had never been mailed. Just written, maybe shared, or maybe kept as a quiet piece of truth never meant to see light. But now it had. I sat still for what felt like an hour. That letter didn't feel like a moment of anger. It felt like a belief, a long-standing philosophy, proof that everything happening now was just a manifestation of a resentment I never knew had grown so deep. She didn't steal from me because she needed the money. She did it because, in her mind, I didn't deserve what I built. And worse, because she believed she did. Suddenly, everything clicked. The cropped photo, the missing video, the stolen funds, the public praise, the private theft. This wasn't an isolated betrayal. This was the endpoint of a slow, methodical erasure. I stared out the window. The fire downstairs was still flickering through the curtains. Shadows danced on the ceiling. I could hear laughter again. Hers, specifically. That high, false giggle she used when she was spinning a story, and everyone around her was too polite or too blind to challenge it. I wasn't going to be one of them. I reached for a fresh USB drive, formatted it, and copied the video file twice. One to go in my safe at the office, the other in my purse. Then I opened a blank document and began drafting a timeline. Transaction logs, cloud access, her proximity to my device, the days she showed an unusual interest in my firm's operations. I wasn't writing for revenge. I was writing for record. When I was done, I created a new email chain and attached everything. The video, the timeline, a message to my attorney, and a BCC to Rhett, who I hadn't spoken to in 6 months but still worked compliance at a national bank. Subject line: "This goes public if anything happens to me." I hesitated only once before hitting send. My phone buzzed as the message disappeared from the outbox. A push notification lit the screen. Attempted login, cloud storage, unknown device. I stared at it. The timestamp was 12:16 a.m. My eyes narrowed. She was still trying to cover her tracks. I stood, unplugged my laptop, and slid the encrypted drives into my bag. It was about telling the part of the story that wasn't supposed to be heard. Because if she was still trying to bury my story, then it was time I wrote the ending myself. I didn't sleep that night. Not from adrenaline, and not from fear either. I just couldn't. My body stayed still, but my mind moved in loops. What I'd uncovered, what I documented, and what I was about to confront. At 6:04 a.m., I finally stepped out of the guest room and made my way to the kitchen. The house was mostly quiet, save for the subtle hum of the fridge and the soft rustling of someone, probably Mom, moving about in the laundry room. By 6:30, the breakfast table was set. Holiday leftovers warmed in the oven, coffee brewed fresh. It smelled like Christmas morning was trying to redeem itself, as if sweet rolls and scrambled eggs could erase the rot crawling underneath this house. I took my seat in silence. I didn't reach for coffee. I didn't greet anyone. Isolde walked in not long after, bright-eyed, smiling like someone who hadn't committed corporate theft. She wore a new sweater, emerald green, probably expensive. Her perfume hit the air before she even sat down. She poured herself orange juice and made some casual comment about the cold front. Maribel chimed in from the stove. "You two look so serious this morning." I didn't respond, not until the plates were passed around, and everyone started eating like it was just another peaceful morning in a perfectly intact family. Then I looked up, straight at Isolde. "You used my dog's name," I said. The words landed like dropped silverware, sharp, sudden, out of place. She blinked. "I'm sorry, what?" I stayed calm. "The name. From that story I told you. 5 years ago, the night we split the bottle of tequila after Dad's funeral. Remember? I told you the password question I used for my recovery email." Maribel glanced up. "Girls, don't," I said to her, gently but firmly. Then to Isolde, "You used that answer to bypass my two-factor. You knew it wouldn't trigger alerts because you spoofed my device's MAC address. You copied my session data while I was in the kitchen with Mom. And that access window, 2:43 a.m. to 3:18, that's not coincidence. That's intent." She stared. For just a second, one split second, her composure cracked, but it returned just as quickly. A half-smile pulled at the corner of her lips. "What are you talking about?" she asked, voice light, casual. "That's crazy." I leaned in, keeping my voice low and steady. "One more lie, and I burn it all. I promise you." The table went still. Maribel looked between us like she couldn't tell which one of her daughters had lost their mind. But I wasn't the one spinning stories. I finished eating quietly. Didn't say another word. Didn't need to, because I already knew what I had to do next. After I cleared my plate and took my mug back to the sink, I returned to the guest room, locked the door, and opened my forensic toolkit. My fingers were steady now, cold and efficient. I started by scanning through a series of contract files, archived PDFs from our internal admin system. Each document had metadata, including origin device, timestamp, and user alias. Most checked out. Then I found one file that didn't. It was labeled as a company ownership amendment, a form we only ever used when updating stakeholder shares. It looked official, polished. My name was on it. My signature was there, but something about it felt off. I zoomed in. The pressure on the letters, the slant, the spacing, close, but not quite. There was no doubt about it. The signature had been copied. The PDF had been uploaded 2 weeks ago from an IP linked to a generic home router. But the machine's host name? Isolde iPad. She didn't even bother changing the device name. And the document. It transferred 5% equity of Ironlock Systems to Isolde Maribel Dawson, listed as a silent partner providing strategic family alignment services. Whatever that meant. It wasn't just an insult. It was a violation. A legal landmine. This contract had been quietly dropped into the folder containing our newest vendor package, the same package connected to the healthcare deal that came with the $428,000 deposit. I leaned back, hand over my mouth. She hadn't just stolen money. She'd tried to launder her name into my legacy. That was the moment I stopped entertaining the idea of this being personal. This wasn't about family anymore. This was fraud, and I was done playing polite. I printed the document, annotated it, and sent it directly to my corporate attorney. I labeled it Urgent Signature Dispute. Then I drafted a memo for my board, preparing them for potential public exposure if the contract had been shared externally. Finally, I BCC'd Rhett. He didn't need context. If he saw my name next to an email that mentioned identity theft and digital forgery, he'd know it wasn't a drill. Then I sat back, stared at the screen, and whispered, "You wanted a company, Isolde. Congratulations, you just acquired a federal investigation. My hand didn't tremble anymore, because while I had been building evidence, she had been building stories, and soon the two would collide. By the time I shut my laptop, the sun had slipped behind the trees, casting long shadows across the backyard. The quiet in the guest room was deceptive. Beneath it, something electric hummed, the kind of stillness that only comes before a storm hits. Downstairs, the house had returned to its performance, classical piano playing softly on Mom's Bluetooth speaker, the smell of cranberry scones wafting from the oven, Isolde chatting like nothing was wrong. She had no idea what I'd just sent. Or maybe she did, and was just waiting to see if I'd blink first. I didn't. But she had made her move too. That much became clear not even 30 minutes later. It started with a ping. An email from our longest-standing client. Subject: urgent. Clarification needed. The message was short, but my stomach turned as I read it. We received an anonymous tip claiming that Iron Lock is under federal review. Can you confirm? Another email followed, then another. 3 clients, then 6. Each one had received some version of the same message, slightly different wording, but the bones were the same. Molly Dawson is being investigated. She's unstable. She has enemies within her own team. She's losing control. The sender? Anonymous. Of course. Routed through a masked domain, metadata scrubbed, but there were patterns, phrasing, sentence structures that were unmistakably familiar. It was like listening to Isolde's voice with a digital filter over it. A moment later, my phone buzzed again. Rhett. I answered before it rang a second time. Check your inbox, he said. Right now. I clicked refresh on my screen. His email was there, time-stamped exactly 4 minutes ago. Attached was a compressed folder. Inside it, a full forensic trail. He'd traced the source of the emails through a VPN used earlier that month to log into a device tied to Isolde's name. Not her main one she hadn't used in over a year, but she hadn't changed the network IDs. Rookie mistake. There it was, a direct IP match, overlapping sessions, an email client registered under a burner alias, but syncing to her primary cloud drive. Sloppy, but effective enough to cause damage before anyone could verify. My hands tightened on the mouse. I looked at the kitchen window. Isolde stood outside, talking to one of our cousins. She was laughing, big, open-mouthed laughter, the kind that turns heads and draws sympathy. She's laying a foundation, Rhett said on the phone. Painting you as paranoid so if you strike, she gets to say it was just another overreaction. Not this time, I replied. He paused. You good? I closed my eyes. No. But I'm done being quiet. By nightfall, Rhett was at the side door. I let him in without ceremony. He looked older than I remembered. More tired, maybe, but focused. We sat at my makeshift desk, and he pulled out a tablet. I put everything in here. Keystrokes, signatures, login routes, timestamps. It's bulletproof. He opened a file. On the screen was the contract with my forged signature, overlaid with 3 other samples from my previous agreements. Look at the pressure, he said, pointing. No hand writes the same way twice, but this is a clean copy-paste, I nodded. She's sloppy when she gets cocky. She didn't expect you to fight back. She never does. Then he showed me the final piece, a set of emails, time-stamped, backdated, and matched to metadata from the burner device, sent to every major client, every investor with a stake in Iron Lock's upcoming quarter. Every single one crafted to undercut me without ever mentioning my name. I stared at the screen, not angry, not shocked, just resolved. Okay, I said. Let's end this. I sat down, opened my inbox, and drafted a new message. Subject: urgent, security breach disclosure, and internal legal action. I kept it simple, clean, every document attached, no accusations, just facts. The forensic report, the contract, the file logs, everything. I sent it to the legal department of our largest healthcare client, CC'd my attorney, BCC'd my board. Then I hit send. Rhett watched me silently. You sure about this? He asked. I was sure the second she used my signature, I said. Now she can explain it to people with actual authority. An hour later, as I was scanning through my logs again, Isolde knocked once and pushed open the door without waiting for permission. "You're awfully quiet up here," she said. "Everything okay?" She leaned against the frame like it was just another day. No pretense of concern, just control. I didn't look at her. I just said, "Depends which lawyer calls you first, mine or theirs." Her smile faltered. Not entirely, but enough to notice. "Come on, Molly. It's Christmas. Can we not do this right now?" I turned, finally. My face calm, my voice steady. "You tried to erase me, from my company, from our family, from the people I built everything with. I'm not playing anymore." Her eyes narrowed, just slightly. "I don't know what you think you've figured out, but—" "I don't think," I interrupted. "I know. And so will the people who cut your checks next year." She stepped back, mask cracking for the first time. "You're making a mistake," she said softly. "This could have stayed between us." "It never was between us," I replied. "It was always just you, taking." She stood there for another second, then turned without another word. The moment the door clicked shut behind her, my phone buzzed. Incoming message. "Action taken. Account frozen pending review." I looked at the screen. Then I smiled. Because the silence wasn't so quiet anymore. The sun barely had a chance to stretch across the kitchen window before the pounding started on my door. I'd barely pulled my robe on when I heard my mother's voice, shrill and breathless. "What did you do to your sister's bank account?" I opened the door slowly. She stood there in her slippers, her phone clutched tightly in one hand, her eyes wild like someone had just told her her house had burned down. I didn't answer. Downstairs, I could already hear Isolde's performance unfolding. The sobs, the gasps, the indignation laced with carefully timed breathlessness. She had always been a talented liar, but when her back was against the wall, she was Oscar-worthy. By the time I made it to the bottom step, she was slumped in one of the armchairs, wrapped in a throw blanket like she'd just survived a hurricane. "She froze my money, Mom. Everything." "I can't even buy gas," she cried, glancing just long enough in my direction to see if it was working. Maribel turned on me. "Molly, for God's sake, what are you doing?" "Enforcing boundaries," I said calmly, moving past them toward the kitchen. Something this family never taught me to do. Behind me, I could hear my sister sniffle dramatically and whisper something about how this was all because of jealousy. Right? Because I had a reason to envy someone who had tried to rewrite my legacy in legal documents. I poured myself a cup of coffee and checked my phone. Messages were coming in, clients responding to the evidence I'd sent, some supportive, some cautious, one legal inquiry. Progress. But in the dining room, the chaos was spinning out of control. Isolde had moved to her next tactic, social martyrdom. "Everything I've done for this family," she sobbed to our aunts, "and she turns it into a witch hunt. I forgave her for shutting me out of her company, and this is how she repays me?" She was rewriting the story in real time, counting on everyone in the room to latch on to the loudest version. Maribel kept wringing her hands. "I just don't understand why you girls can't just work this out privately." I turned back to her, slowly. Because it stopped being private when she forged my name, when she stole nearly $500,000, when she tried to convince my clients that I was mentally unstable. My voice didn't rise. I didn't match the theatrics. I didn't have to. Isolde's tears grew louder. It wasn't until I got a call from an old friend, Lauren, that the next crack appeared. Lauren and I had built our first contracts together. She was more than a friend. She was my sounding board during the rough startup years. I'd told her things I hadn't told anyone. "Hey," she said, her voice clipped. "I just wanted to say, you really should have kept this in-house." My breath stopped. "Excuse me?" "You blindsided everyone. You could have handled it quietly, without dragging her name through the mud." My stomach dropped. "Lauren, are you serious?" She hesitated, then said, "You know she reached out to me, right? A couple of weeks ago. Said she was worried about your stress levels, that you were spiraling." My jaw clenched. "So, you gave her information?" "She was worried," Lauren replied. I thought, God, Molly, I thought I was helping. By undermining me? I asked. She didn't answer. I ended the call. So it was true. Isolde hadn't just infiltrated my company. She'd used the emotional currency she'd built over the years to recruit others, to weaponize concern. I stared at the photo of me and Lauren that still sat on my phone's lock screen. I deleted it. Brunch came. No one touched their food. The table was tight with tension. And that's when Isolde stood up. I could feel it coming before she opened her mouth. I just want to say something, she began, her voice trembling just enough to seem authentic. I've been attacked, lied about, and manipulated, but I still forgive her. I love my sister. Always have. Gasps of admiration came from the older relatives, the ones who'd never seen a spreadsheet or a court filing. Then she moved around the table. She walked straight to me and hugged me, her voice near my ear. You'll be painted as unhinged. I've already planted the seeds. I didn't move. I didn't push her away. Instead, I pulled out my phone from my sweater pocket, unlocked it, tapped the screen once. The video played clearly, the sound muted, but the image undeniable. Isolde, sitting at my laptop, typing, plugging in a device. Timestamp, December 25th, 3:14 a.m. I didn't need to explain. The room went silent. I locked the phone again and slid it back into my pocket. Then I stood and walked away, leaving her standing there. Behind me, not a single person spoke. But I could feel the weight of eyes shifting, the kind of silence that speaks louder than noise. I didn't even flinch when the courthouse door clicked shut behind me. The room was cold, sterile, and smelled faintly of coffee and tension. I sat across the table from my attorney, a quiet, precise woman named Adrienne, who spoke only when necessary, and always in full sentences. Isolde's legal team entered next. I recognized her attorney from one of those TV commercials that aired during daytime game shows, the kind of lawyer who promises he'll fight for you like family, though I imagine none of his family would want him. Then she walked in. No makeup this time. Hair pulled back, jaw tight. She didn't look at me, not directly, just took her seat beside her counsel, clutching her water bottle like it was a shield. There was no sign of the woman who had strutted through our mother's living room 3 days ago acting like the misunderstood golden child. The healthcare firm's corporate counsel joined remotely, projected onto a screen that loomed like a quiet judge. Adrienne opened her laptop, connected the encrypted drive, and laid out the folders in front of everyone. Hard drives, screenshots, copies of the forged contract, email chains, forensic reports. I've reviewed the material, she said calmly. We believe there is sufficient cause for legal action based on federal and state statutes regarding corporate fraud, wire fraud, identity theft, and document tampering. Isolde's lawyer coughed lightly. We'd like to enter into a discussion for resolution, preferably private mediation, to avoid unnecessary exposure. Adrienne didn't blink. You should have come with that 2 days ago. The screen pinged with a notification. The healthcare firm's representative leaned in. We're prepared to suspend the contract effective immediately pending outcome of criminal investigation. Our internal team has already initiated a breach protocol. The silence that followed was heavy, the kind that sucks the air out of the room. For the first time in weeks, I didn't feel the need to fill the space. I let it sit. I didn't want an apology. I wanted documentation. I wanted a permanent record. 3 hours later, I sat on the courthouse steps while Adrienne made final calls. My coffee had gone cold in my hand, but I held it anyway. It was something to hold. The confirmation came that evening. Charges had been filed. Isolde had been arrested after a short hearing. She was taken into custody. Corporate fraud, identity theft, wire fraud, forgery. The plea deal never materialized. The volume of evidence, combined with her refusal to show remorse, left no room for leniency. 6 years in federal prison. Minimum of 4 before parole eligibility. Full restitution required. Asset seizure approved. No one celebrated. No one texted me, congratulations. And that was fine. The following evening, I received a call from Maribel. Dinner's at 6, she said, like we'd just come back from a grocery run. I said nothing. You're still welcome, she added. It's just, things are different now. No kidding. Still, I went. Not out of obligation, not out of nostalgia. I just needed to see it through. The table was smaller than usual, quieter, no sparkling cider, no playlist humming in the background, just clinks of forks and hollow conversation. No one mentioned Isolde. No one asked how I was doing. They talked about the weather, about a cousin's new car, about the neighbor's Christmas lights. I barely touched my plate. As I rose to leave, Maribel followed me into the hallway. I wanted peace, Molly, she said softly. Not this. I turned to her. Then maybe you should have told the truth a few decades ago. She didn't argue. Outside, the wind had picked up. I pulled my coat tighter, stepped off the porch, and didn't look back. The next morning, I drove to the cemetery. I hadn't been there in nearly 2 years, not since the day we buried my father. The headstone was simple, understated, just like him. I stood there for a while, the December air cutting at my cheeks. Then I opened the letter he'd written me before he died, the one I kept in my wallet, folded so many times the edges were soft as cloth. You're not too much, he'd written. You're just too real for people who built their love on pretend. I didn't cry. I didn't feel victorious. I just felt done. Not defeated, not angry, just finished. Back in my apartment that night, I poured myself a glass of wine and checked my inbox. One message stood out. We'd love to feature your story in our Women in Cybersecurity Spotlight series. I hovered over the reply button for a moment, then I deleted it. Instead, I opened a browser window and made a donation to a women's shelter in West Austin. Under the name of my new foundation, no press release, no ribbon cutting, just a quiet transfer of power. That night, I lit a candle. Not for Isolde, not for forgiveness, just for me, for surviving the story no one believed. The wax had barely cooled in the dish before I woke the next morning. No alarm, no demands, no dread, just stillness. The apartment was quiet, save for the occasional creak of the hardwood beneath the radiator's breath. It was the kind of quiet I hadn't heard in years, not the silence of someone waiting to be interrupted, the kind that whispered, "You're safe here." I made coffee, poured it slow. No need to rush anymore, no fire to put out. I drank it at the window, watching the January sky shift from silver to soft blue over the rooftops of Austin. No one had called, no texts, not even the kind you dread. Are you okay? Just checking in? And honestly, I didn't need one. I opened the top drawer of my desk and pulled out the letter again. The edges were worn now, creased from being folded and unfolded a dozen times, but the words still felt as sharp as the first time I read them. You're not too much. You're just too real for people who built their love on pretend. I whispered it out loud. This piece, I built it. A week passed before I visited Isolde. I wasn't sure why I needed to. Closure, curiosity. I couldn't call it forgiveness because I didn't have that to offer. The federal facility sat on the outskirts of the city, bare, brutal, all concrete and barbed wire. Inside, everything moved at half speed, the waiting, the searches, the silence between buzzed doors. I waited in the visitation room, sitting in a chair bolted to the floor, my palms resting flat on the table. Then she walked in, thinner than I remembered, eyes dimmer. The sharp edges of her presence, always so calculated, so composed, were gone. She sat down without saying a word. So I started. You didn't ruin my life. I watched her jaw tighten. You just proved how much I had to protect it. She didn't look away, didn't nod, just stared back with something like disbelief. Or maybe she thought I'd gloat. Maybe she was waiting for me to. Instead, I stood up. I won't come again. I don't hate you, but I don't trust you, and I never will. Still, she said nothing. Outside, Maribel sat on a bench, wrapped in a heavy coat. Her hands were folded neatly in her lap, but her eyes were raw, her face pale. As I approached, she stood slowly. She used to say you were the one who'd abandon us, she said. Her voice didn't carry judgment, only tired truth. But I think we abandoned you first. I didn't argue. I didn't hug her. I just nodded once and walked to my car. It was early evening by the time I got back to my apartment. I didn't bother turning on the TV. I opened my laptop and navigated to the nonprofit registry. Second signature, support for victims of financial betrayal by loved ones. I submitted the application 2 days after the sentencing. And now it was official. No press, no announcements, just a quiet line in the ledger. A new start for people like me. People erased from within their own families. People who weren't believed. When I opened the account dashboard, I saw the first donation. No name, just a note. Some mistakes can't be fixed, but I see you now. I stared at it longer than I expected to. Maybe it was Mom. Maybe it wasn't. Either way, I didn't reply. Instead, I closed the screen and reached for a stack of folders. Notes from the hotline I was quietly planning to build, templates for legal aid partnerships, a list of therapists who understood betrayal that starts in your bloodline. This wasn't revenge. This was reclamation. 11 months passed. December returned like it always does, earlier than you expect, colder than you remember. There was no tree in my apartment that year, no garlands, no gifts, just one small candle and a playlist of holiday instrumentals that reminded me of nothing specific. I stirred cocoa on the stove. Not the packet kind, but the real thing, bittersweet chocolate melted down with milk, cinnamon, a pinch of cayenne. I'd learned to slow things down. To enjoy the steps. Snow dusted the street below. It didn't stick in Austin, but it was enough to hush the city for a while. I curled up on the couch, hot mug in hand, and finally, let my shoulders drop. No calls, no demands, no one asking me to fix something that wasn't mine to begin with. I reached into the drawer one last time, unfolded the letter. My father's handwriting stared back at me. Don't wait for them to say you matter. Live like it's already true. I folded it carefully and slid it back, not because I needed to remember, but because I'd already become the kind of woman who never forgets. Sometimes, the hardest part of healing isn't getting justice. It's accepting that the apology may never come. This story isn't just about money. It's about boundaries, identity, and what it means to reclaim your place when the people closest to you try to erase it. Have you ever had to walk away from family to protect your peace? Tell me in the comments. I'd love to hear your story. And don't forget to